Welcome back to the channel. On this episode I'm going to show you how I install a consumer unit into the camper van. The consumer unit I'm using is a 3-way consumer unit, and the consumer unit will be used for when I'm hooked up to shore power, either at a campsite or at a friend's house. I'll be able to use the mains power from the domestic power supply to power my fridge, the water heater and all the 240 volt sockets in the van. Yeah, so I'm going to show you how we do that, and hopefully it's right. The first thing I've got to do is cut a panel for the back of the van where it's going to, where the consumer unit will be going. So just inside the door I have the hookup point for the 240, and it's going to go somewhere around here. So I'm going to cut a panel so I'll be able to secure the consumer unit to the panel and then feed the wires in through the back of the panel. I'm going to drill 3 holes, 1, 2, 3 for the MCBs, and also I'm going to drill a hole on the side of the steel. This is a steel unit, so I can ground the earth cable to the chassis of the van. Let's get doing that. Let's go. The consumer unit is now ready to be installed. What I've done to the consumer unit is, when I purchased it originally, it had a 16 amp fuse breaker, whatever you want to call it. It had a 6 amp and it had a 32 amp, but I don't need the 6 amp because my lights will be run on the DC power in the van from the batteries, and also the 32 is too large, so it's you don't want this too large, because then that would mean that there would be too much amps going through the wires. So the first thing you want to trip is MCB in your consumer unit, because if that doesn't trip, and if you're putting too much load, I think, through the cables, well then the cables have a potential to catch fire, and you basically destroy your van or your appliances. So from what I gather, I've got a 316s, so 1, 2, 3. They're all 16 MCBs, and what I'm going to do is connect one directly to the fridge, connect another to my water heater, and then connect the other to it'll be a radial circuit of sockets in the van. So I'm going to have one here, so that will be placed here like that, and then underneath that, once I have this wired up, I'm going to have this 2-gang socket. And what that's going to do is, that 2-gang socket will be used to power the battery charger. So it's going to, when I'm plugged in to the shore power 240 volt, the battery charger will then charge my onboard batteries, and then from this I can run a radial circuit, which is basically you're just running the cables from the back of this to another socket, then from that socket you run cables to another socket, and so on. And that means that you're able to use the consumer unit when you're then on hookup to power all the sockets in your camper van. So I've had to move the camera because it's again raining raining non-stop. It's been very hard, been very challenging trying to do this build because I don't have anything to cover the van. And anyway, so as I said, I had 3 16s, and the reason I've gone for the 16 amp MCBs is because your breaker needs to be the weakest part of the link, so therefore if you're going to overload your wires, well then the first thing to go will be the breaker. So for example, if you were to overload it with like a microwave and an oven, or I don't know, a fridge that got a surge for some reason, and if you didn't have a 16 amp breaker and your cable was 2.5 mil cable rated at 23 amps, I think that's what it is, and if that went over that, then you could potentially cause fire to your cables and damage to your units. That's fair. So I was trying to get my head around the consumer box and the MCBs and ECBs and DCDs, and why there were 6 and 16 and 32. And as far as I'm aware, the 6 amp is so this will be going into your house or into a garage area setting, like an outhouse. So the 6 amp would be for the likes of your lights, and I think the 32 amp MCB would be for if you had like a ring circuit, a ring final circuit. And obviously you're not going to have a ring final circuit in your camper van because it's I don't know why actually, but anyway, it's what you would have is you'd have a radial circuit, and the reason behind that I'm not entirely sure, but I'm sure someone who's watching and who's a lot more qualified than me can write it in the comments below and educate a lot of us. So yeah, I've gone for 3 16 amp MCBs. So the reason I'm using the 16 amp MCB breakers, the breaker needs to be the weakest link, so if you overload the circuit, the first thing to go will be the breaker, and that will prevent you from setting fire to your cables. So I think the Arctic Blue cable I'm using is 2.5 Arctic Blue cable, and it's a rating of I think 23 amps. So for example, if I was to use the 32 amp breaker, MCB breaker that comes with this consumer unit, well then if I was just to hook directly into that, my fridge and another socket, and then I was using other appliances like a microwave or a blender or a Green Star juicer or whatever at the same time, then you're going to overload the circuit because it's a 32 amp MCB breaker, and the wire, the Arctic Blue 2.5 core cable is only rated at 23 amps I think. Well then you're going to overload the circuit and the MCB won't trip, therefore you're going to potentially result in your cables catching fire and other damage happening to your van and your unit, your consumer unit. So that's what I've got my head around so far. I'm not a professional, I'm still learning about all this stuff, and I hope that's going to sound clear to you. It sounds clear to me, and that's why I've gone for the 3 16 amp MCB breakers. So as I said, one is going to go direct to the fridge, one will be going to my my water heater, and then the other one will be for the radial ring circuits. So what I've done to the unit so far is I've drilled a hole in the side, I've used a bolt, a washer on either side, and then to that on the inside I've connected I think it's a 6 mil earthing cable, and I just crimped the end of that cable, then I secured that with a locking nut bolt. Then I drilled 4 holes in the back. This hole was slightly too big, so I made the other one smaller, and drilled 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, one at the very top corner for the earthing cable to come out. So that's because I want the unit to secure to this, and then I'm going to drill holes in the back of this and have all my cables come through straight into the unit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do that and then get back to you. We have this cable and we have this cable, and then we have the consumer unit, which is here. Then we have the plug, which is here, and this is what I want to test. So we have the RCD, which is a trip switch. Then you have the 3 MCBs, 1, 2, 3, and this is the original one that came with it. It's a Harrock, and as you can see, it's B16, which is 16 amp breaker. And then this one and this one I changed out for the 6 and the 32. I put in a 16 and a 16, so I've got 3 16s. And the one that I'm going to run now, I'm going to run these cables that will go into the live will go into the MCB. The neutral will go up to the neutral bar, and the earth will go up to the earth bar. And it's the same with this. It's the same with the 240 volt hookup, which is here, coming from, if you remember, around the side there we've got the 240 volt on the side. Well, this is the cable coming from that, and that will go, your neutral will go into, if you can see, you have N there, that will go up there, in there to the neutral, and then we've got the live is beside it. Oh yeah, so when that neutral runs in, when you connect that neutral there, well then that is actually connected, pre-installed. Then that runs, so from the top it'll run down from the top up here, and then it'll come here, down around the side, up along here, and it will connect onto the neutral bar. Then you'll connect your live into the one beside it, and then your earth will go onto the earth bar along with the other earth from your socket. So I'll give you a look behind the consumer unit and the way I actually, so as you can see there in here you have the ground, and that ground is running along the top and out the back, the hole there, and then that runs down the side here. It runs down the side, and I have this, I rubbed off the paintwork, connected it with a bolt, or connected with, yeah, put a bolt through and put a locking nut in the back, so that's actually connecting onto the bare metal of the van. And then in behind here I've got to shorten those screws, so I'm going to get new screws for that, but this is only temporary now. You can see where the cable here is from the socket, so it's running up the back of the socket and in through here and out here. That's going to go into that MCB here. Sorry for the shaky camera. And then the other cable, which is this cable from the hookup, is running back there, here, up there, and then out here. So that's how that's all put together. And then slots in there like that. Okay, so that's all now hooked up and connected, and I have the cover on, and I'll just show you what I've done. Here's my cable. Let's start with the cable coming from the hookup, which is here. So I'm coming from that cable, runs the blue wire, and that goes in to the neutral marked N. Alright, so then that runs down through the RCD, and then that neutral continues, if you can see at the bottom, neutral, and that was already pre-installed in the consumer unit. Then that runs up to the neutral bar, just there. Then the second wire, which is the brown wire, runs into the live. The brown wire is the live. Then that runs down through the RCD, and it runs down through onto the buzz bar, and now that buzz bar is now live. That's bringing your live 240 volt into the van, and it's going through the first MCB, the second one, and then the third one. So now to bring that live from here into the MCB, and then from the MCB you have your cable coming from this socket. Alright, so it comes in through the back. Alright, comes in through the back from that socket, and then the live then, which is the brown cable, here, that connects into the top of that MCB. So then if you think about it, then that's bringing the live from here, the RCD, through the buzz bar into this MCB, and then the live from that MCB is bringing it out into this socket, so that makes the socket live. And then the neutral off that socket then goes to the neutral bar, sorry, the earth goes to the earth bar, and then the neutral goes to the neutral bar. Blue is the neutral, green and yellow is the earth. So that should be correct, and let's give it a go. Now it's time to hook up the consumer unit to the house power 240 volt. So what I'm going to use for that is this hookup cable, 16 amp 240 volts. It's just a regular campsite hookup cable with the end